Retirement is one word that crosses a fighter's mind when they are done with the sport and no longer want to continue. Fighters retire when they want to move on to other things in their lives, but there are some fighters who retired but still had so much potential to do a lot more in the sport. So here is 5 retired fighters who could still compete with the best. Number 5. Mirko Cro Cop is one of the best heavyweight strikers to have ever competed in MMA. He possessed freakish knockout power where he would knock any heavyweight dead with any of his limbs. He had a reputation of decapitating everyone he had faced with his brutal head kicks. In his last fight in the UFC, he faced Gabriel Gonzaga in a rematch at UFC Fight Night 64 where he won the fight by TKO in the 3rd round. He was later suspended for 2 years due to an anti-doping violation where he had admitted that he used a human growth hormone for his shoulder. In 2016, the UFC terminated his contract and he finished his career at Rising Fighting Federation, winning the Openweight Grand Prix tournament where he announced his retirement from the sport at the age of 42. If he decided to make a comeback and sign with the UFC, I believe he has the ability to compete with the best heavyweights in the UFC. He has a wealth of experience in both MMA and K1, which will definitely help him get the victory. Number 4. Urijah Faber was the former WEC bantamweight champion who had faced all the best fighters in the UFC bantamweight division. He would have great success in racking up solid wins over top ranked fighters but would always come up short in the title fights. In his retirement fight, he faced Brad Pickett at UFC on Fox 22 where he won the fight by a unanimous decision and retired at the age of 37. If he ever decided to come back for a few more fights, I believe he still has the ability to hang with the top bantamweights in the world. His experience combined with his well-rounded game would help him reach the top of the division with a few wins. Him making a return would create a massive buzz in the bantamweight division and would get the fans excited to see him fight once again. Number 3. Brock Lesnar was the former UFC heavyweight champion who became one of the biggest attractions in the UFC. He faced all of the top competition at that time, where he was quickly able to win the title and successfully defended his title twice. In his last fight, he faced Mark Hunt at UFC 200 where he won the fight by a unanimous decision. Later it was found that he tested positive for banned substances where he was fined $250,000 and was given a suspension. The fight was changed to a no contest and he later retired at the age of 37. Although he still signed with the WWE, I believe he could still hang with the best fighters in the UFC heavyweight division. His high-level wrestling combined with his freakish power would certainly give the heavyweight problems if he ever decided to make a comeback. Him making a return would bring life back into the heavyweight division, which would both benefit him and the UFC. Number 2. Miesha Tate was the former UFC bantamweight champion who had a long career of fighting elite fighters in the UFC. She was a well-rounded fighter who was able to use her high-level grappling to defeat her opponents. Her biggest accomplishment was when she defeated Holly Holm by a rear naked choke in the 5th round at UFC 196 to become the new UFC bantamweight champion of the world. She would next lose her title to Amanda Nunes by a rear naked choke in the 1st round at UFC 200, and in her last fight, she fought Raquel Pennington at UFC 205 where she lost the fight by a unanimous decision. In her post-fight interview, she announced her retirement from the sport at the age of 30, saying that she had lost her competitive drive and that she didn't have the desire to compete. If she finds the motivation to make a comeback, I believe she still has the talent and the experience to make a massive impact in the division. With the UFC women's bantamweight division lacking in contenders, I believe she could easily put together a couple of wins to challenge for the title once again. Number 1. Anthony Johnson was one of the hardest hitters to have ever stepped foot inside the octagon. He possessed unbelievable power where he would violently put his opponents away. A good example of this was when he took Glover Teixeira's soul in just 13 seconds of the 1st round at UFC 202. In his last fight, he fought Daniel Cormier for the 2nd time at UFC 210 where he lost the fight by a rear naked choke in the 2nd round. In the post-fight interview, he announced his retirement from the sport at the age of 33. A lot of fans thought that Anthony Johnson retired too early and still had the talent to become the UFC light heavyweight champion. I believe if Anthony Johnson considered making a comeback, his raw power and his violent fighting style would help him make it back to the top once again. A lot of fans would still enjoy Anthony Johnson sending fighters to the Shadow Realm with his knockout power. Hopefully, he finds the motivation to make a comeback and compete once again in the future.